Get ready to dive deep into the unravelling of the global order in this week's podcast with our latest podcast episode featuring the eye-opening book Disunited Nations by Peter Zeihan, where we explore how the collapse of globalisation will impact the United Kingdom and what it means for our future. Welcome to the 10th episode of the Clive Bird Experiment. In this week's episode, we're going to discuss Disunited Nations by Peter Zeihan. We're going to discuss the collapse of globalization. We're going to discuss how this affects the UK. So, without further ado, let's begin. Disunited Nations by Peter Zeihan is a thought-provoking and engaging analysis of current state of global politics and economics. The book discusses how the international order as we know it is rapidly unraveling, and that the world is headed towards a new era of fragmentation, competition, and conflict. The author begins by outlining historical context of the current international order, tracing its root backs to post-World War II era when United States emerged as the world's dominant superpower. He goes on to describe various geopolitical and economic trends that are currently undermining this order, such as raising nationalism, demographic changes, and technological innovation. One of the key themes of this book is the idea that the world is becoming incredibly fragmented as countries and regions become more self-sufficient and less reliant on global markets and less reliant on global trade and cooperation. Zeihan argues that this change has been driven by a number of variables, included the decline of the United States as a global hegemon and the rise of China as a regional superpower, and the growing influence of regional blocs like the European Union and the ASEAN nations. Throughout the book, Zeihan presents a wealth of data and analysis to back up his argument. He draws on a wide range of sources, from economical statistics to historical anecdotes, to paint a vivid and compelling picture of the world today. He is particularly adept at explaining complex concepts in a clear and accessible language, making this book accessible to readers with very little background in economics and political sciences. Despite dire predictions for the world, Disunited Nations is ultimately a hopeful book. Zeihan argues that while the world may be entering a period of increased competition and conflict, there is also opportunities for nations and regions to thrive in this new environment. He suggests that countries that can successfully adapt to these changes in the global landscape will be the ones that prosper in the years ahead. Overall, Disunited Nations is a highly informative and engaging book and offers a unique and compelling perspective on the current state of global politics and economics. Whether you are a casual reader or a serious student of international affairs, this book is well worth your time. It takes around 12 hours to read, but every minute is interesting and thought-provoking. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book as it has opened my eyes to some new concepts and new potential. The book's outlook for the UK is rather a mixed out, as on one hand he acknowledges the United Kingdom is one of the few countries in the world with a long history of global engagement and a deep reservoir of soft power, which he believes gives the UK an advantage in terms of its ability to negotiate favourable trade deals and to form strategic partnerships with other nations. However, Zeihan also highlights several changes facing the UK in the years ahead, and one of the most pressing is the ongoing process of Brexit, which he argues will have significant negative economic and political consequences for the country. Zeihan suggests that the UK's departure from the European Union will weaken its position in the global economy and leave it more vulnerable to external pressures. In addition to Brexit, Zeihan points out a few other factors that could impact UK's prospects. These include demographic changes, such as aging population and declining birth rates, which would limit its economic growth and reduce its military capabilities. He also notes that the UK's energy infrastructure is increasingly reliant on energy imports, which could leave it vulnerable to supply disruptions and price spikes in the future. Despite these challenges, however, Zeihan suggests that the UK still has numerous strengths that it can leverage to remain a significant player in the global order. These include its strong ties with the United States, its deep connections with the Commonwealth countries, and its ability to innovate in fields like finance, technology, and healthcare. Overall, the outlook for the UK in Disunited Nations is somewhat uncertain. While the country has significant advantages in terms of history, culture, and soft power, it also faces some challenges that could limit its ability to adapt to a challenging global order. Ultimately, the UK's future will depend on its ability to navigate these challenges and capitalize on its strengths in order to remain relevant and competitive in the years ahead. In Disunited Nations, Zeihan suggests that the UK faces significant challenges in the changing global order, but it also has a number of strengths that it can leverage to improve its position. Here are some of the steps that the UK could take to improve its position. The UK needs to forge new trade agreements. With Brexit, the UK has lost access to the European single market, which is its current largest trading partner. The UK should now focus on securing new trading agreements with countries outside the EU, particularly with major economic powers like the United States, China, and India. These agreements would help boost the UK's exports and attract foreign investment. The UK needs to strengthen its ties with its Commonwealth countries. The UK has historic ties with the 54 countries of the Commonwealth. Major economies like Canada, Australia, and India. The UK should work to strengthen ties with these countries, particularly by building closer economic and political partnership. This would definitely help to offset the negative impacts of Brexit and provide new opportunities for trade and investment. The UK has a strong tradition of innovation, particularly in the fields of finance, technology, and healthcare. The country needs to start investing in research and development to encourage new innovation that can drive economic growth and competitiveness. The UK also needs to create an environment that is conducive to entrepreneurship and innovation, for example, by reducing regulations and taxes for small businesses. The UK has a long history of a strong military. The UK has a long history of military engagement around the world, and maintaining a strong military will be crucial for its global influence in the future. The government should invest heavily in the military, especially our navy, to ensure that we have the capabilities to respond to threats and challenges around the world. The UK faces significant demographic changes, including an aging population and a declining birth rate. The government should develop policies that encourage immigration, particularly of young, skilled workers. To offset these challenges, the government should invest heavily in education and training programs to help our current citizens adapt to the ever-changing global market. Luckily, the UK has many strengths it can leverage to improve its position in the changing global order. By investing in innovation, strengthening our trade ties with the Commonwealth countries around the world, building a strong military, especially our navy, and ensuring that the country is energy independent and not requiring imports for energy, the UK can get itself into a position where it becomes a major player in the new world order. So what does the collapse of globalization mean for the UK? Globalization refers to the interconnectedness of the world's markets, of the world's economies, cultures, and societies, and it has been a defining feature of the world since the post-Cold War and World War II eras. However, with globalization now in decline, the world is moving towards a more fragmented, regional focused order. And if globalization does collapse, the UK could be negatively affected in several ways. The UK is a heavy trade dependent country. Our economy relies heavily on exports and international investment. If globalization collapsed and trade barriers arose, this would make it harder for the UK to export its goods and services, which could lead to slower economic growth, higher unemployment, and increased inflation. Globalization has contributed to more interconnectedness of the world and has facilitated cooperation and collaboration between countries. If globalization collapsed, this would lead to increased political tension as countries become more focused on their own interests and less willing to work together. Now, the UK is a major global player, and we would be massively affected by increased tension, and we could find ourselves massively in the center of political conflicts around the world. Now, globalization has contributed to a greater cultural exchange and diversity, which the UK has embraced. As people from different countries and backgrounds came into contact with each other, our countries all changed as we amalgamated with each other. Now, with the collapse of globalization, countries will start to look massively more inward, which would result in less interaction with external cultures. This could negatively impact the UK social cohesion and diversity. Overall, the collapse of globalization would have significant impacts on the UK, and whether the UK would be able to 100% survive the collapse of globalization is uncertain, especially if we continue to run the country the way we do. With the trend of fragmentation and regionalism likely to continue over the coming years, the UK will need to adapt the way it works to remain competitive in this ever-changing market and the ever-changing global world order. I think it's important to sit and think about this. So America has got to the point now where they are almost fully self-sufficient in energy, food, and pretty much all the necessities of life. And this is going to cause America to slowly look inwards rather than outwards, which was what they've been doing since the end of the World War. At the end of World War II, America had the largest economy. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, America had the biggest economy than the entire world put together. Now, with an economy that size, it was very easy for them to go to countries and offer basically defense for butter contract. Unfortunately, the world has changed now, and there are actually economies that are bigger than the American economy. So their current political structure, their current way they manage globalization has to change. And with like all generations, the political taste for America being an outward-facing country has changed over the last presidencies, and it started from President Clinton. As the presidents have looked inwards and inwards and inwards, culminating in the Donald Trump presidency, which was all about America, you can see the trend of the way globalization is going to be reduced, and America are going to slowly reduce their interest. And as they pull out of countries like the Middle East and the Asia Pacific and these other areas that they don't have as bigger interests anymore, there's going to be a very big void that's going to fill, and it's going to create a massive amount of uncertainty throughout the world, and it's especially going to affect countries that rely on imports to survive. Now, I've done previous videos on the UK's population failure, and I've done recent videos on our food security, and I've done videos on our energy issues. Now, all of these issues are all propped up by international money and international trade. If any of these parameters had to collapse, that would be massively detrimental to the UK. And this is why it's so important we change the way we think about these things.